That is Nick Wright. If I'm pointing correctly, that is Bart Scott. In
CC grew hair.
For Chris Carter. That would not be Chris Carter's thing. We got a big Monday show. Thanks for being with us today.
Pleasure. You guys know I have no life.
Yes. Well, then what does that make us, Bart? What does that make us? We do it every day. Steelers season came crashing down yesterday. Cowboys are heading into the playoffs on a high note, but we have to start with whatever's in the water in Philadelphia, because for a second straight year, the Eagles are in the postseason, thanks in large part to not their franchise quarterback, but his backup, Nick Foles. How'd they get here? Well, they have to beat Washington, and they did, 24-0. And the Vikings had to lose, which they did. And that secured the 6th and final spot in the NFC playoffs for the Philadelphia Eagles. Nick Foles, their backup quarterback, completed 25 straight passes, including 2 touchdowns, before leaving the game with a chest injury. He will undergo further tests today. But back to the state of affairs in Philly. Here's head coach Doug Peterson on the team's mindset down the stretch.
This team really hung together. I credit the leadership of the team, the coaches, just keeping the guys focused on one game at a time. And this last half, things began to kind of click for us. And, you know, the guys just got better as each week came. And you know, to do what we've done here this last month and a half is credit to the guys.
So, Nick, on December 9th, the Eagles were 6-7. They had lost to the Cowboys. Carson Wentz was hurt. Things looked like they weren't going great for the defending Super Bowl champs. Now here they are in the postseason. How impressive has this Eagles turnaround been? Wildly
impressive. The last 3 weeks, they look like the Super Bowl champs again for the first time all year. The turnaround really started a few weeks before that Cowboys game. They were 4-6 after getting mollywopped by the Saints. Just embarrassed. The Saints were running trick plays on them, running up the score. They won their next 2 games. Then they took Dallas to overtime in a game they could have won, and Carson gets hurt. But these last 3 weeks with Nick Foles, and I know we'll talk about Nick Foles, it's not just the play of the quarterback. It's the overall team play where they beat a Rams team in Los Angeles, a Rams team that was fighting for the 1 seed. Then they turn around and beat a Houston team that loss cost Houston the 2 seed. And then they beat Washington, and everyone expected them to beat Washington, but they dominated Washington. Fletcher Cox looks like Fletcher Cox again. All around, this team, all of a sudden, this last month of football, looks not just like a team that snuck into the playoffs at 9-7, but a threat in the postseason. And I understand Nick Foles is the biggest story with them, and he should be for a good reason. But the entire team is playing its best football that it's played all year.
The main reason that this team is playing well is because of St. Nick. He's the greatest Christmas present that any team could have asked for. When you look at the same thing that Nick is doing, it's the same thing that Lamar Jackson provided for the Baltimore Ravens. He energized this team. He gave them a sense of belief. And what happened is now you start to look at the rush attempts, 34 rush attempts. You know, you look at how they're moving the football, but it's all about the rhythm, too. It's about this offense is getting the rhythm. They're starting to run the ball. It's simple with Nick. Him and Peterson have such a chemistry. It's either RPO, check down, or shots.
Or deep shots.
Or shots, right? And all you have to do is hit a couple of shots, you know, for you to be successful. You know, usually when you throw the ball deep, 3 things can happen, and they're all positive for the offense. You talk about the illegal, contact, holding, PI. They rarely intercept it. And what's happening now is now this defense gets an opportunity to rest. You're protecting the secondary that struggles. And now you talk about Fletcher Cox. You talk about that front 7. They have the time to go rest on the sideline and get a drink of water. Before it was Carson Wentz, and they were giving too much to Carson Wentz. You notice they haven't invited Carson Wentz back.
Well, and Carson Wentz been trying to get back. Carson Wentz went and got a second opinion
take your time.
outside of the team. And I would say Nick Foles got some bruised ribs, maybe cracked ribs.
2 weeks in a row.
This week. No, he got hit real hard last week by Clowney, and I couldn't believe he came back one play later. This game, they removed him from it. He's going to have x-rays. I think he's going to be able to play, but he has been, Jenna, it's been sports movie stuff. It's been the type of stuff you love.
I love this. And while you're right, it's not all Nick Foles. My question to you would be, is there something about something as small as or as big as a quarterback change, regardless of who it is, just something that tweaks it a little differently? Maybe the players respond a little differently, regardless of his talent or skill level, that's enough to sort of propel a team to play the way they've been playing?
I think Doug Peterson understands Nick Foles' limitations. And with Carson Wentz, there are no limitations, so they throw the whole playbook on him. And then he's overthinking. They're doing too much. Now they're going back to the basics, running the football, setting up deep shots, play action. Now Now, all of a sudden, Alshon Jeffries looks like he's returning back to form. Nelson Aguilar is open. He's open everything. And somebody on this set said that this team was better about 2 months ago. You should have saw my Twitter feed, or you should have saw my Instagram. They were coming at me. Apologize, Philly. Apologize.
But do you?
Well, but here's the other thing. We know certain teams are great as front runners, right? The number one seed in the AFC, I think, is one of those teams. If they jump out on you early, they're going to do what they did to Oakland yesterday. It's going to be over in the first quarter. What we know about this Eagles team in the last 2 years, they haven't worn the front-runner hat very well.
They don't want to.
They didn't have it that long. By the time they became, oh, my God, this team could go to the Super Bowl, and people started looking at them like that last year, is right around the time Carson got hurt. So they never really had the target on their back. This year, when they did have it, even with Foles in the beginning, they didn't respond. This team responds offensively and defensively to that underdog role that we laughed at last year. And the quarterback, I can show it to you here. He's played 11 games in the last 2 years for the Eagles. On the left-hand side, those are games that if they lose, their season is over. 6 games, either playoff games or this run. He's been spectacular. The other 5 games are the games at the end of last regular season, beginning of this regular season. He hasn't been very good, but when he has been in a must-win situation, he's been spectacular. He tied the NFL record yesterday for consecutive completions in a game, and that was when the game was still in the balance. He threw an early pick when it looked like he might let Washington into the game, and from that moment forward, he was spectacular.
Okay, so they're in the postseason now. They're playing as good as they've been playing. Nick Foles looks like he's got some of that magic back, but are they good enough to get back to the Super Bowl?
I don't know about get back to the Super Bowl because they're still flawed, especially in the secondary, but they are a team that nobody wants to play because they got into the playoffs, and it's almost like a new lease on life. You know, they're playing with house money, so they're a dangerous football team because they have that experience. They understand the situational football that takes place in the playoffs. They understand how fast the game moves. They understand, that, usually teams lose it in the playoffs. They don't win it. And, they have that experience. So collectively, they had that experience. They brought in Bennett. They brought in Haloti Ngata, who are Super Bowl champions. They have enough experience to find ways to make it difficult for you as a team to put them out. They won't be an easy out.
And listen, I'm not going to say they're good enough to go back to the Super Bowl, but let's just look 1 week ahead. They're playing the Chicago Bears this coming week. Now, I think the Bears have been an undervalued, underrated team all year, but nobody knows how Mitch Trubisky is going to play in his first career playoff game. Nobody knows how Matt Nagy is going to coach in his first career playoff game. And by the way, who did Matt Nagy learn from? Andy Reid, a guy who's had his own playoff struggles as far as what he does with his offense in the postseason. The Bears are better. The Bears are playing excellent football. The Bears were, without the Bears, the Eagles aren't in this thing because they knocked the Vikings out yesterday. But the Bears are one of the few teams in this postseason where even if you don't fully buy into the Nick Foles magic, you can go into it and say, oh, well, they might have the edge at quarterback. As of lately, their defense, they're not playing like the Bears defense, but is playing, I think since week 12, they're one of 3 defenses with at least 18 sacks and 10 takeaways. They're being opportunistic, and they do scare you offensively because of the deep shot. The thing with the Carson Wentz offense was there's a reason Zach Ertz obliterated Jason Witten's reception record by a tight end.
Right.
It was just Ertz, Ertz, Ertz. Now Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar, getting Darren Sproles back was huge. You have a much more potent offensive attack.
Nobody's happier than Alshon Jeffrey. I mean, he's too. Does it make a difference to you that they're on the road?
Oh, of course. Listen, now, yesterday they weren't on the road. Right. I mean, they were, but
homecoming game.
That was crazy. The way the Philly fans took over FedEx Field, I think that's what it's called in Washington, and made that a home game. Of course it matters. And we've never seen this Eagles team play a road playoff game. But the elements aren't going to bother them in Chicago, I wouldn't imagine. And I think the Bears are happy they won yesterday. Yeah. I think they'd rather be playing the Vikings a second time rather than playing the Eagles this week.
Well, they could have controlled that. That's on them.
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, we got to take a break. Coming up, speaking of, the Vikings missed the playoffs after signing Kirk Cousins to that old $84 million contract. We'll talk about that next on First Things First. You're already shaking your head.
Still it.